Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Big Little Ladies.
Woo!
So, last time we talked about the very last episode of season 1, and we talked about the first episode of season 2, which was very unsettling, I think.
For
But
sure.
it just gets more unsettling as it goes. So, we are diving right into episode 2, Telltale Hearts. Would you like to read the lovely little summary to get everybody up to speed, Caitlin?
Sure. Before I read it, we can talk a little bit about what we mentioned for the season premiere of season 2. And I think we just mentioned a little bit about, Bonnie's a little bit in a funk. She, is the only character who seems to be, besides Renata too, I think she's being affected by seeing the murder, but she's definitely not the same Bonnie that she was in season 1. And then let's see, Celeste dealing with the aftermath of Perry's death, and having Mary Louise in town. Mary Louise is a new character who's special.
That's a great word for her, special. Also, check the veneers on Meryl Streep.
Right?
Gives her that extra creepy look.
The chipmunk, I might kill you in your sleep look. And they bring up this concept of the Monterey Five. And we see that there's still an investigation going on. There's an investigation going on the entire season 1, and we see that it hasn't ended. Perry's dead, but there's still something being fished out there. So, episode 2, Telltale Heart. Celeste crashes her car while on Ambien with no recollections of what happened. A worried Nathan calls Bonnie's parents to town. Gordon is arrested for insider trading and stock fraud by the FBI. He tells Renata that he has lost all of their money. Mary Louise finds out about Ziggy's percentage from
Parentage.
Parentage. I don't have my contacts.
It's alright, guys.
So if I trip over some things because I'm a little blind. She refuses to believe that Perry raped Jane by victim blaming her, which is messed up. Madeline grounds Chloe for finding out that she told Max, Josh, and Ziggy that the 3 boys share the same father. Jane reluctantly tells Ziggy about how he is the product of a rape and discovers Madeline's infidelity.
So, a lot of stuff happens in this episode, and it's kind of interesting the way that it all goes down, right? Of course, we start off with Celeste, who's on Ambien and just crashes. Now, we don't know that she's on Ambien until afterwards when Madeline picks her up, and she admits to having taken Ambien to get to bed and had no idea how she even got in the car in the first place. Now, when she brings Celeste home, of course, Mary Louise and Madeline butt heads once again.
That's one of the funniest parts of the episode.
It really is, and one of my favorite parts is, I don't even know, Madeline being like, I don't know, I was just running some small person errands or some shit. I'm really on that small person thing because it's just it just shows you Mary Louise puts herself on this high horse the whole fucking time, and literally everything she says to other people is a projection of herself. She tells Madeline that I'm sure on your brightest days you are a godsend, and on your not so brightest days, quite the opposite. And it's just what the fuck are you, Mary Louise?
Literally.
One day you're helping with the twins, the next day you're accusing Celeste of being the worst mother in the world.
Look in the mirror.
Come on. Right, so I think that's really fucking great, and I mean, you gotta love Meryl for making you hate her. She's a genius at that. If you've ever seen the movie Doubt, where she plays that horrendous nun, just great example of that as well.
Nathan bringing Bonnie's parents to town. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Now afterwards, I realize maybe he had good intentions, but obviously it made it worse. It made it a lot worse.
I mean, I love the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because it's honestly people have good intentions for their best interests, right? Not understanding, because I mean, we rewatched this episode last night, so if you guys are up to date with the latest episode, which was The Bad Mother, you know that bringing Bonnie's parents into the scene is not a good idea. And we even get a little bit of insight as to that in this episode that I honestly didn't even catch until rewatching. It's such a quick scene. But Nathan, I mean, at the same time, you can't really blame him because it seems like Bonnie never told him that the relationship with the parents is honestly not okay, in fact, very abusive.
Right, and from the outside, it's easy to say if Nathan had really known Bonnie, then he wouldn't have called the parents. But if, she never really let him into how she was raised or whatever with her parents, then
it's kind of hard, right? And I mean, we start to see in this season, because last season I feel like we all think that Bonnie and Nathan are a decently happy couple. I'm not saying, they're like Perry and Celeste on their best moments, but they have a kid together. There's love. Nathan obviously cares about her. Bonnie obviously cares about Nathan, but we start to see that when push comes to shove, which is actually, the name of an episode in last season, Nathan does not have the emotional capacity to connect with Bonnie, and Bonnie doesn't have the energy to try to help him create that capacity,
right.
Which is a huge incompatibility, and we don't really start to see it until shit actually gets serious.
Right. Yeah, and it's definitely an interesting dynamic that, because she is definitely the most ethnic person in the show, and you don't really see them struggle until now in season 2. It'll be really interesting to see how it ends for Bonnie.
And, I mean, we didn't really mention it here in the summary, so let's just talk about that quick scene where Bonnie, she's remembering something, right? She's
going into the ocean.
Right, she's looking at the ocean and she's remembering. First we get a cut of her mom piggyback riding, or having Bonnie piggyback ride on her mom's back, and they're walking down the ocean, and then you hear this, not the ocean, down the sand, along the shoreline, and then you hear this voiceover of Bonnie going, I'm scared to swim, and then all of a sudden you see, a younger Elizabeth, Bonnie's mom, a younger Bonnie, in the pool. Elizabeth is holding Bonnie up above the water. We can tell it's kind of the deep end because Elizabeth is up to her shoulders, and Bonnie is saying how she doesn't want to learn to hold her breath at that moment. She's not ready. And Elizabeth, goes, well, honey, you gotta learn to hold your breath because that's how you make sure that you don't drown if something ever happens to you. And now, it's a very, very quick scene, you guys. You have to honestly be very attentive and catch it very quickly because Bonnie goes, I'm scared, I'm not ready. And as soon as she says that, in the most bulldozing way of a boundary that I've ever seen a mother do, is the most traumatic thing I've ever witnessed on a TV show happen to a child so quickly, so fast, and then we're blown away from it. Elizabeth literally puts her daughter underwater. No questions. Forces her underwater. No, she doesn't bring her back up before it cuts away. Bonnie, this is like the first clear sign that this parent was incredibly motherfucking abusive. Mm-hmm. And we start to understand why Bonnie really resents her father, because a father really, first of all, for any parent to be abusive, fuck that. Second of all, for the mother figure to be abusive to the girl, there's, I have abandonment issues from my father. I have abuse issues from my father. The amount of bullshit that I probably would have on top of that, if my mother had been the abuser and my father the one who led her, I'm not even sure. Mm-hmm. So we really start to get a sense of why Bonnie is the way she is and why she's taking this so hard. Mm-hmm. And we learn even more in episode 6. But let's move on to Gordon.
Right. We mentioned in the last episode that we saw the first glimpse of Gordon's character whenever he sort of threatened Jane in the coffee shop. And we felt like that was a really important scene just because it really led us into what we're seeing now. Gordon was arrested for, I think, stock fraud, insider trading. He lost all of their money. That's crazy.
But they can't touch Amabella's trust.
True. Go Amabella. But yeah, I can't say that I'm surprised. That's the thing, is I was kind of waiting. I knew something had to happen. I mean, I know Amabella's had a really rough couple of seasons, but Renata has all this pent up anger, and I was waiting to see exactly where it went. And it really didn't have anything to do with Renata. It was all Gordon. And now obviously she has someone to take it out on, because rightfully so. But it's definitely.
We do get a tip though, about the FBI is who came to arrest him, right? And in a later episode, in the episode we're gonna talk about next, Renata, there's a throwaway line here and there where she mentions that who else would be tipping off the FBI?
Yeah.
And that's another allusion for those of you, not illusion, those of you who loved literature as much as I did. There's an allusion, right, which is a reference to the investigation once again. So who did tip them off? In my opinion, probably Quinlan. In my opinion, Quinlan is probably trying to get these ladies up against such a crazy corner that, they just kind of, the lie has to come out. And, I mean, I can't say that these ladies aren't making their own bed, and Gordon certainly didn't help it.
Mm-mm. And with Amabella, it's kind of there's a reason that she's the one that's been struggling the most. She has, the most resources. She should be the most supported by her lawyer parents. I mean, she's in the most ideal, I guess, situation. And she's literally, having the most issues at school, and with anxiety and such.
Well, and, I mean, we'll see it play out even more so in the next episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to mention that, for those of you out there who think that money makes everything better, this is the prime example that no, because obviously Renata's stress level is literally at a motherfucking 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
She's not even aware that her stress level is at 1,000. She's the kind of woman that you're like, oh, Renata, why are you stressed? She's like, I'm not stressed. Literally.
Seething.
Seething, steaming, fucking crazy. And then you have Gordon, who's quite literally the opposite, way too relaxed to be okay, has no idea how to handle emotions, and we later on actually find out that the poor au pair has been the one that's had to stress manage Amabella.
Mm-hmm.
Which, can you imagine coming from your home country and, not only now you have to be the nanny, you have to be the cook, and you have to be the this and this and that, and now you have to be her psychiatrist, too. Minus the pills.
Oh, see, stress management, I think the nanny was sleeping with the husband. That's what that means.
Oh my god, are you fucking kidding?
She was staring right at him, and she was an extra $160,000 for stress management it was for the husband.
Oh my god, okay, you guys, I'm fucking oblivious. I mean, she probably did totally have to be a psychologist for Amabella, but that is way fucking worse. Okay, well, we just jumped ahead. Sorry for those of you. Actually, not sorry. We've told you there was spoilers from the beginning, so, ew, that's even worse. Okay, so she had to be a child psychologist, a prostitute,
and stress manage the husband, because how often are they banging it out? And when they do bang it out, we've seen them bang it out once.
Have we?
It was in the bathroom at the office, and it was
I thought it was him and Renata.
Oh yeah, them.
That was him and Renata.
Yeah, but I feel
because how often do they? Yeah, no, right. How often does Renata want to have sex with Gordon? The way she looks at him. We can tell she doesn't fucking love this guy, you guys.
She's kind of low-key disgusted.
She's low-key disgusted by this man.
And it gets worse, obviously, when he loses
all the money. And I love that line. I will not be rich. Laura Dern, we love you. Thank you for doing such a phenomenal job with one of the most crazy characters to ever exist on HBO history. And this is Khal Drogo, Khaleesi, everyone included. I think you might be up there with the Mad King.
Mary Louise crosses many boundaries in this episode, as always. But she definitely crosses some boundaries with Jane. That was
showing up at her work.
And it's telling the rapist that she refuses to believe that her son is a raper. It's well, then what do you want from me?
Right. No, and the thing, too, that... I mean, oh wait, no, that's the next episode.
Oh.
They don't have that conversation they don't have the full conversation until the next episode, but we do get...
That Mary Louise figures out that Ziggy's...
Yes, so, I mean, yeah, so Mary Louise figures it out, right, and she goes to Jane's work at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and I mean, it's kind of awkward, right? Literally, Jane is getting off work, or as we assume, or on lunch break or something. And Mary Louise is literally just standing there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And she doesn't even talk about that. She first asks for a paternity test. Right? And Jane refuses to give it to her. And that's when we get the first hint of, like, she's definitely going to be victim blaming.
Right.
Because she's insisting on this paternity test. And I love one of the lines, by the way. This is just great writing, but it's so true to Jane's character that Mary Louise tries to go, well, you know, things happen nowadays. People don't remember or whatever. And Jane is just like, I remember better than I care to.
Right.
And I love that line. It's, like, such a good dagger because Mary Louise is just so out of line this whole season.
Mm-hmm.
This whole season. It's like, you start off thinking she's going to be, like, just kind of, like, a helpful grandmother. Mm-hmm. And I can totally understand, like, looking to find out what happened to your son. But when the entire town is completely aware of the fact that he was not the man everyone thought he was, and his wife is telling you that, and the woman who was raped by him is telling you that, and, you know, like, your grandson who was abusing another girl in class, it's just like,
how do you not?
How do you not?
Right.
And the only way is, I mean, like, I'm not shaming old people, guys, but a lot of people over the age of 60 have a really hard time with seeing gray areas.
Accepting change.
Not even change, but accepting that people can be good and bad at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, to him, I mean, we're going to get into this next episode with the conversation with Jane. So, I mean, we can leave it at that, but Mary Louise is not on board with the whole rape thing because her son has to be an angel, apparently.
Right. Yeah, she's like, she crosses a boundary in every scene she's in. It's like with Madeline, or with Celeste, or with Jane, or with the kids.
Or even with the detective.
Yeah, so that's her MO.
Yeah, literally. Her mode of operation is crossing boundaries.
And then, finally, Madeline.
Okay.
We find, like, this scene really sucked. The way that Ed finds out about Madeline's infidelity.
Do you want to hit that first, or do you want to talk about how Chloe told Max, Josh, and...
Yeah, we can talk about them both, because they kind of fit in together.
They do. I guess it's like one daughter fucking up before the other.
Right.
Although you can't really blame Chloe. You know, Chloe hears in hushed tones that... From her mom, that Max and Josh and Ziggy share a father. And, of course, Chloe, being the gossip queen that she is, because she's Madeline's daughter, I mean, what else is she gonna learn, you know? She fucking goes and she tells Ziggy and Max and Josh that they all have a brother in 2nd grade.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, like, I mean, it's like, you wanna, like, if you look at Chloe with an adult's perspective, you wanna slap her in the face, because you're like, Chloe, are you fucking kidding? You didn't know better? You didn't think they'd guess? You know what I mean? But, of course, you have to, at the end of the day, like, Madeline has at fault here. First of all, why is she having these hushed conversations when her kids are home, if she doesn't want her kids to find out? Second, why is she going around being a gossip queen and expecting her daughter not to do the same?
Exactly. Like, how can you actually ground someone for doing the exact same thing that you do? Like, and that's that, like, do as I say and not as I do type mothering style, which isn't a mother style. Like,
no, it's an irresponsible philosophy that really should have never started in the first place.
And so I don't know, you kind of feel bad for Chloe, but you also want to be like, what the fuck? Like, because, like, she really, I mean, you also just realize that she really doesn't know any better.
No, she's 6.
Like, she can't know any better.
Right.
And that's the sad part is I feel like Madeline grounded her because she was more upset in herself. Like, she should have been.
Right. And Ed brings a good point about the fact that she didn't tell him.
Right.
She didn't tell him that, you know, and she's like, well, and her excuse is like, well, I'm protecting Celeste's privacy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know, I get that, but I also understand that a life partner in the form of, you know, I mean, marriage is a fucked up institution, but that's literally a different, like, whole podcast, not even this one. But in theory, if you have a partner as a married partner, you're going to share the things that plague your mind with them, and you're going to trust them not to tell anybody.
And it's one thing to not share that information with your girlfriends, but, like, who is Ed gonna, like, go and share, like, oh, Celeste, blah, blah, you know?
Right, yeah.
And if you would do that, then it's like, then why are you married to him?
Exactly, like, and we all know Ed's not like that.
Exactly.
So, now, speaking of Ed, there is something that we can blame the daughter for, this time Abigail, because she's a teenager, and she was getting a jab at her mom that went terribly wrong. Not gonna lie, I was pissed off at Abigail in that moment. I was like, I don't know why you think it was even halfway okay to say that. But do you want to describe that scene, Kayla?
Yeah, they were in the kitchen. Abigail has decided to move back in with Madeline because Bonnie doesn't have the energy to give Abigail, I guess, everything that she needs, and at least in that moment. And they're actually doing really well together. They're like communicating really well, and so you can tell that their relationship is changed a lot. But they like kind of get into this like little quarrel, I guess. Was it about college?
Yeah.
It started out as about college and turned into about her future.
I think what... Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's what it was. Madeline was saying that she feels like college is one of the foundational building blocks, and Abigail's like kicking it right out from under her. And so Abigail goes, well, I thought family was that too. Did you kick that out? Like, I saw you kick that out. And Madeline, of course, goes like, what are you saying?
And she was like, you fucked the theater.
Literally, you fucked the theater director. I'm like, really, Abigail? You really want to say that out loud in the huge house that you can't fucking even hear when somebody gets home?
And then Ed just pops out. He's like, oh, hey.
And of course, Abigail's mortified. And like, honestly, like, you know, guys, when I say I wanted to slap her in the face, I obviously entertained this in my head. I would never slap anybody in the motherfucking face. But like, in that moment, like, and I know Abigail feels awful. Like, you know, the next episode we get a glimpse, and
she was like, I thought you said he wasn't home.
Well, and Madeline, you know, is very mature in that moment and goes to say that it's not about you saying, it's about the fact that I did it.
True. And the fact that she said it kind of says something about Madeline. Like, obviously, she thinks it's okay to have those types of things, like, say those types of things to her mom.
I mean, there's that, yeah, of
there's
course.
There's that relationship. Like, it's a whole...
It's a whole dynamic. Right. And...
But it really sucks.
No, it sucked, and it was a very shitty way to find out for Ed, and, I mean, it's... You know, I mean, basically, by the end of that episode, he, like, walks out.
Right.
And you don't...
And you don't really know what happens. You're
No.
kind of just... Is he gonna come back?
Yeah. And, I mean, it pretty much feels like the title of the next episode, which is The End of the World. Here we go. So, Bonnie clashes with her mother and remembers traumatic incidents from her childhood. Oh, okay. So, this is the drowning incident that we were talking about before. Emma Bella has an anxiety attack during a lesson about climate change. Renata hires a child psychologist and finds out Emma Bella is worried about the planet dying, her father going to jail, as well as Renata's mental state. Renata blames Gordon for it and confronts Principal Nepal and Mr. Perkins about teaching second graders about climate change. Mary Louise approaches Jane at work and requests for a paternity test to be done, which Jane refuses. Mary Louise then lurks in the parking lot of Jane's apartment to take a look at Ziggy. She finds similarities between Ziggy and Perry's twin brother, who died as a child but refuses to accept the fact that Perry is an abusive and a rapist. To save their marriage, Madeline and Ed visits Les's therapist. During a parent meeting at Otter Bay Elementary, Madeline breaks down while speaking. Jane and Corey go on a date, but she is unable to be intimate with him. So, you know, here we talk about how Bonnie's clashing, how she's remembering all of these different things that happened to her in childhood. We see that Bonnie's mom is very hippie. She's very holistic, and you could even say she veers on psychic. And you know, like I'm all for a good crystal and a good ritual and things, but you don't push those sort of things on people, and
unless they're open.
And Bonnie's not, and she's very clear with her mom that she's not. And her mother, pretty much like every mother in the show, just pushes boundaries. Maybe not every mother, but
we see in a dinner scene where they're supposed to just have like a nice dinner conversation, and it's literally the mom just like putting like word crucifying Nathan.
Basically saying, you know, blaming Nathan for basically his lack of ability to connect with Bonnie. And Nathan's like, well, I notice things. And she's like, well, if you notice things, like, why are we here? Blah, 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 and all this shit. And it's just like Bonnie, and of course, if you've seen up to the latest episode at this point and you rewatch this, like, you want to throw the wine glass at this motherfucking lady because she's a fucking hypocrite.
The biggest.
How can a woman that ignores her child's needs and emotions be talking to her husband about the lack of connection between him and his wife?
Right. Yeah.
Like, it really kind of like, I mean, when you're first watching this the first time around, you kind of want to root for her.
It baffles you a little.
Baffles you, but you kind of want to root for her. You kind of like want to see that she's trying to help Bonnie, but at the end of the day, we all see she's just trying to help herself.
Right.
And make herself feel better about what Bonnie's doing. Now, the climate change thing is interesting. I'm not gonna lie, I was wondering what that scene in the classroom was all about. I'm like, why are we listening to this? And then, of course, we see poor Amabella's shoes, like the freaking Wicked Witch of the East under the house, like come out of the
Come
closet.
out of the closet. I was like, was she in that the whole time?
Dude, right? And of course, we see her getting rushed to the hospital. Renata, again, Laura Dern, I hear you are such a conscious being. To play such a reactive, crazy bitch, I can't even.
And we see it even in the hospital. Renata's like freaking out in the hospital. What'd you do to my daughter? Where's my daughter? Blah, 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 blah. The doctor comes in and he says, ma'am, your stress is
Not
affecting your
helping.
daughter. And she's like, oh, I'm not. Like, she just goes off on this doctor's like, I'm not. Blah, blah, blah.
My favorite is like, I want to move to Stanford. Okay, why, miss? Because it's Stanford, please.
Yeah.
Like, seriously? Okay, so you're bankrupt. You want to spend more motherfucking money that you don't need to spend because it's fucking Stanford. You guys, that's Renata's fucking logic. And let's move on, of course, to the next scene where you're like, who the fuck is this weird-ass lady that's
child
walking
psychologist.
down with Amabella down the stairs? We learn child psychologist in the name of Dr. Peep. And we find out that she's just worried about the planet dying. But, and I really, I love how the psychologist goes. Mostly it's the planet dying, but she also talks about worried about Gordon going to jail. And she's also worried about her mother's mental state, which, let's be real, even before the lie, Amabella was worried about her mother's mental state.
I love the way that she said it because she's like, something's not right and it's not been right for a long time. And you don't know how long time that long time is, but how long
Right.
time that long time is. But you know that it's for, like for sure at least the murder, but we met Renata before.
And she's not one of those people. I mean, let's be real. The child psychologist literally tells her there are 3 causes to this, and she focuses on the 2 that aren't her.
Mm-hmm.
Because focusing on her means I'm wrong, and
Right.
she can't deal with that. So what does she do? She goes to confront the principal and Mr. Perkins about teaching the second grade and about teaching them climate change. And I mean, their response, in my opinion, is very... I mean, it's a good thing. They're honestly being bombarded with climate change everywhere.
Right.
If the schools aren't deconstructing it for them, although I don't think their strategy is the best.
Right.
I'm
It
like-
should be normalized, but maybe not in the way that we're
that
all
they're
gonna get doomed.
Right. Like, if that's the message that's coming across, your lesson plan needs to change. However, my favorite at the end, like, it just shows how unconscious and how just completely, like, ridiculous and not reasonable Renata is ever. She's never been reasonable, by the way. She hasn't. Just saying. Reasonable people don't lose money that fast. Reasonable people are able to... Like, the reasonable people also don't stay with gamblers and frauds. I don't know. That's just,
There's that. And it's funny because she's a lawyer.
Right. And if they share all that money, you would think she would know what he's doing.
Right. Well, you're supposed to be completely, lawyers are literally,
They're on the side of reason. Like, although granted, a lot of lawyers skew reason, which are not reasonable at all. So that's, maybe Renata. But I love the end of the conversation with Principal Nepal and Mr. Perkins. Is this because I'm not rich? Is this because the principal goes, Renata, we're having an assembly tonight. You're not the only one complaining. You're just by far the loudest. And of course, instead of being like, okay, great, I'll be at the assembly, she's like, oh, it's because I'm not rich. Oh, no. The principal goes, it may come as a surprise to you, but this school is here to serve all the children, not just your child.
not just Amabella.
And of course, instead of, being like, I mean, the principal didn't help anything, but there was no helping anything with Renata. Instead of being like, oh yeah, of course, Amabella has other kids, that she goes to school with, she goes, oh, it's because I'm not rich. It's because I'm not rich. Okay, well, I'm gonna get rich again, and I'm gonna buy everybody a polar bear. And I'm like, yeah, that'll help the earth, Renata. That'll help climate change. You wanna buy every kid a polar bear? It's kind of like that parent who's like, let's get all my kids a snake. They get all their kids Burmese pythons, don't know how to take care of them, and now they're huge,
They're 20
feet long, and they don't know what the fuck to do with them.
Right.
And then it's so irresponsible. Like, I don't want people like Renata to have money in their hands. I really don't. It's dangerous.
And it's interesting her too because she's like, I won't be poor again, or like all whatever. And so for someone who came from the opposite type lifestyle, it's interesting to see like how she's become so far like in. Like usually some people have a little bit of like, I know what it was like to be like that, so like I can appreciate She's just like, no.
Like, if it's not Prada, she won't carry a purse.
Right.
Like, it's ridiculous. I don't know, Renata is definitely one of the people, like, personal story, guys. Renata is one of the people that I honestly get triggered by the most. And it's because if I, like, lost a shred of my consciousness, I would turn into this woman. And that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not fucking okay. Like, I love Laura Dern. I fucking hate Renata Klein. Like, she can go to fucking hell sometimes.
And then,
Mary Louise,
Mary Louise, yes. So Mary Louise, we said she goes to Jane's work, makes Jane super uncomfortable, asks for a paternity test, and then later on she creeps on them and tries to get a good look at Ziggy.
And she does.
And she notices that he is, identical to Perry's brother who passed
Raymond.
away, and she shares the story with Jane and asks to be part of his life because she's his grandma.
And Jane, of course, rightfully so, says she's got to think about it.
Right.
And Mary Louise's response is, of course, an invasion of boundary, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how the conversation goes quite, but she basically, goes on to ask the woman who's been raped by her son, because she just refuses to believe that Perry could have possibly done something terrible, if she saw any good in him before the rape. And it's just like, you, like, put yourself... And that just tells you she can't put herself in anybody else's shoes.
No.
Mary Louise is quite literally incapable of putting herself in anybody else's shoes. And she even mentioned, she goes, I just can't reconcile the fact that my son was evil. And I just want to...
Well, what do you want us to... Like, what can anyone tell her after she says that?
Right. I mean,
that will help her to reconcile the fact that, like, if she literally refuses, like...
And then I want to talk about, too, even the fact that I don't believe anyone's evil. I believe that people get traumatized and then they store emotions in a way that is completely and incredibly detrimental to their health and to the health of the people around them.
Perry is a product of his mother, Mary Louise, and the traumas that he has suffered. Obviously, his brother passed away when he was young.
His father was probably abusive as well.
Right. He's a product of these people that he was surrounded with, and whether he had a choice or not. And it's like you can only, and the same with Max. Like, you can only, blame someone as much as you're willing to blame their, like, parents.
Their
it's
upbringing.
Like, yeah.
And Perry, we could say, of course, like, he had the adulthood, you know what I mean? He had chances to reparent his wounded inner child, we could say. And he didn't.
And it's different as an adult.
And it's different. That's his responsibility. But that line just really shows Mary Louise is quite incapable of seeing herself as having any fault for her son turning into an abuser later on.
Right.
And, and again, it shows us this black and white thinking, guys. Like, rapists are oftentimes great businessmen, great fathers, great sons, you know what I mean? Like, just because a person's a rapist, it doesn't, like, just because they've raped people, they're abusive, it doesn't mean that they don't have redeeming qualities.
Right, and, it's a sign, it's fact that people can change. And, it's kind of funny because we can see that Mary Louise kind of can't change, and we see later on, with her son that Perry has a difficult time. Like, obviously he's like, I can change, he never changed. And so, there always is this ability for rapists to not become rapists, but they have to, like, want it and have to, like, whatever. And, and as a child, I feel like for Max, like, I feel like he really wants to be a good boy. Like, he wants that. He didn't know. Like, it really was. So it's interesting seeing the dynamic between, like, they're seeing three different generations of abuse almost.
Yeah, and it does make you wonder. I'm like, I mean, I'm genuinely hoping that in the last episode, if you're up to date at whatever, spoilers, Celeste is going to question Mary Louise in the trial. And I'm really wondering if she's going to get down to, was Perry's father abusive?
Yeah.
Did you condone the abuse?
Yeah.
Was there anybody that was abused in your household? You know what I mean? Like, because even if it's just the grandfather.
Or was it, herself? Like.
Yeah, or were you an abusive mother? Who fucking knows? We don't know, but I'm hoping we get into that. And that's pretty much the end of that conversation. And I mean, I just always feel for Jane.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of Celeste, we get some. She had some issues like throughout the entire first beginning of this season with being okay after her husband's death and trying to come to terms with those feelings. But we do see Madeline and Ed visiting her therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And we see them. It's funny, I love that scene because you don't realize Ed is there
until they want you to know he's there.
Until the therapist asks him a question and he's like, oh, thanks, and then they put him in. And you're like, that's just literally their whole, like, dynamic. Like, and it's sad. And he sees it, too, and it makes him sad.
It does.
Makes him sad.
And in that scene, I mean, I'm not a fan of that therapist's technique.
No,
like,
terrible.
I don't think going, well this, I know better, blah, 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 like with this, like, high and mighty tone. I don't think that's the best way to get people to open up and be vulnerable. And honestly, vulnerability is really the only place where you can heal yourself and grow from. So, Dr. Reisman can kind of go suck a dick and go back to therapy school. But, I mean, maybe for some people it works. For Madeline, it obviously doesn't.
No.
It provokes thought, but later on we see her in Abigail's bedroom, and she basically just goes, well, the doctor's a crock. And I'm sorry, like, if that's how you're coming across to your patients, you might want to rework your strategy.
Right, and then we see her later on, they're at this meeting that Renata was told to go to.
Right, the assembly about climate change.
And, you know, they asked to hear from the parents, and Madeline happens to be the one that goes up, and she just sort of has a breakdown. Like, she's like, things darn always good. Like, she's like, we need to tell them that, you know, all these fairy tales aren't actually happy endings. And, like, she really just goes on for, like, 5 minutes about, like, almost nothing, but everything. Like,
almost nothing yet everything. And then my favorite part of that scene is when we look back at her and then she looks back at the audience. It's like, obviously the whole audience is still there, but all she sees is Ed. And that's who she's really talking to. And I mean, that breakdown, like, in my opinion, I'm like, as I'm listening to it, I'm like, I agree with some of what you're saying. And then the other parts of what you're saying, I'm like, you just need to get this shit out because you're in the space that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because obviously things do work out. Life does happen for the best. Things happen, but things also happen that cause you to grow. And if in that moment you're going, well, this sucks, that's your fucking opinion, with all due respect.
Right.
Because for all you know, 2 months from now, you're going to be really happy for that situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So...
Or you'll understand that it had to happen.
It had to happen, right. Like, you're going to see there's value. But, of course, Madeline is in this place where that's not where she's at right now.
She goes back and Abigail's just like, Abigail, give me some wine. And Abigail's like, I heard about your speech. Rough.
Oh, yes. Okay. And, of course... The end. So, well, no, wait. We forgot something that happens... Oh my gosh, okay, we forgot something that happens in this episode that this doesn't mention. Mary Louise is rifling through Celeste's pills.
That's right, that's terrible.
Mary Louise, like, Celeste goes into her bathroom. Mary Louise is literally rifling through her pills, and of course Mary Louise, you know, being the, like, sly, stupid bitch she is, she's like, I needed to sleep, blah, 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 blah. It's like, you can't text her and ask her where it is.
Melatonin.
Like, or something, right? And of course Celeste is onto it. She's like, you're spying on me. Like, what's your fucking deal?
Yeah, she's like, you need to find somewhere else to stay.
Right, and I mean, I'm glad for that, you know, and it's funny because Mary Louise, it's like, she just has this dumbfounded look on her face as if everything she does is like, oh, that was wrong? I'm just like, seriously, lady?
And I
no wonder you raised a fucking rapist. I'm sorry, but
right?
fuck.
Well, exactly.
Like, the neglect of her own awareness is insane.
Perry is literally, like, the result of Mary Louise's whatever fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and it's funny because she's like, Vicodin, this is strong. And she's like, well, like, sometimes I needed it whenever Perry would kick me and I was in pain. And she just looked at her like, whatever.
Like, that lie again. Oh my god, that thing again. It's like, why the fuck would she be prescribed Vicodin, you dumb bitch? Like,
it's like she probably got rib cracked or two.
Dude, no, she
For
did.
sure, right. And it's like,
I mean, it's just like the therapist said, like, oh.
it's like, do I need to pull out my receipt? Like,
Wait, let's talk about something. Somewhere along these couple episodes that we just watched, her therapist has her relive one of the scenes with Perry.
right.
Right? Because Celeste talks about how she still misses him, how she doesn't want anybody but him. Right? And Dr. Reisman, which is making more progress with Celeste, I think, than she is with anybody else, asks her to relive the scene where I guess they were coming home from a Christmas party, and Perry pretty much like beat the shit out of her, right? And she asks her to put Madeline in her spot, and of course Celeste is like, no, that's not fucking okay.
Right.
You know, and I think that definitely feeds into that scene with Mary Louise, because Celeste, I think, is finally on board with, like, I'm sick. If I miss this man, I'm fucking sick.
Right.
You know, and
she knows that she's not right. She's not saying that she's 100%, but...
No, and she even admits it to Mary Louise, because she admits it after she tells her about the whole Ambien thing. She talks about how Perry and her relationship was complicated and how sometimes the violence would lead to sex, and she says, like, I'm not blameless.
Right.
But I'm not saying that I hold all the blame. And of course, Mary Louise just literally, like, and walks away.
Yeah.
You know, which fucking sucks. And now, of course, you know, lastly but not least, of course, Jane and Corey go out on a date, which it's pretty cute. He's a cute kid. But then, of course, he tries to kiss her. And this scene really had me thinking, because I've had boys, like, I'm sorry, guys. My stomach, I guess, wants food. I've had boys ask me if they could kiss me before they kissed me. And then I've had men just kind of, like, go in for the kill, you know what I mean? And I would rather be asked, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
I would rather there be a moment of eye contact, just kind of like they had, and be like, is it okay if I kiss you?
My thing, right, if I really want him to kiss me, like, I'll kiss him.
Right.
But if I'm, like, kind of iffy about it, like, I do want to be asked.
I would love to be asked,
Right.
because, and I mean, granted, of course, Corey is a little bit, if you haven't noticed, on the spectrum. He's a little awkward. He's, you know, he's got a little thing going on for him.
Right.
But he's really sweet. And I enjoy what Jane told him. You know, she's just kind of got to be a neutral right now, which I like. That was a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, and then they ended up doing this weird little dance thing, and
Yeah.
it worked. It was cute.
Yeah.
You feel better. Like, you feel like, oh, like...
You feel like he's a good guy.
Yeah, like, he might actually be someone who could... Because, you know, Jane, see, whenever you are, like, at my worst, like, I would relate to Renata. I think at my worst, I would relate to Jane, where it's, like, letting the worst things that have ever happened to you dictate how you live your life now. And in my worst, like, that is something that I would possibly do or, like, relate to, because I'm not really Madeline. I don't really see myself as, like, as a Celeste or anything, but and so it's cool to see maybe, like, her get to a place where she can kind of pull herself into an awareness of what happens to me doesn't have to be the rest of my life.
Right. Doesn't have, like, I don't have to live the aftermath of this forever.
Yeah.
You know, especially now that she's got some closure, she knows who the rapist was. You know,
And he's dead.
Right. Yeah, so that is what we are left with at the end of the world, which is the third episode of the second season. Now
4
for
episodes.
now for our story time. Those of you that are listening on audio, thank you so much. Story time is only available on audio. For those of you watching on YouTube, head over to our audio room for story time. We are available on all of your streaming platforms aside from Google Play, but that is just a matter of time.